Hello world, it's Thursday the 19th of January 2023 and we're looking at a forecast for soaring from Worcester tomorrow the 20th of January 2023, and the magic is back in Worcester. Let's have a look what's happening. I'll start off actually here, which is the sounding for Worcester at 2 o'clock, and in fact looks quite a lot like the sounding of today. We still have this northwest wind gushing in, drops in speed as with altitude and then picks up again, but it's lighter than it was today. And at 5 o'clock we have the same thing, but by 5 o'clock it's dropped off to 20 knots northwest, still killing off all of the lift in the valley itself. Let's look at the winds. This is this localized gusting wind in Worcester, about 22 knots tomorrow instead of about 30 we had today. But if we look at the ridges from Tulbach to Porterville down to the front ridge, are all pushing 8 to 12 knots, I think. There's a little aberration down here, so going too far south might be a challenge. Zooming out, we can see that those winds carry on up to the north, still say 6 to 8 knots, but the direction is right onto the ridges. And to the east we see from about Ashton eastwards we have a southerly blowing onto the Langeberg, also 6, 8, 10, even 12 knots in places. 5 o'clock, similar, the winds have picked up. Over here we see we're getting 10 to 12 knots on the front ridge, slightly less on the Witzenberg, still up on Porterville. Little corner here is a bit less, but all of these are southwest winds directly onto the ridge. It goes down as far south as probably Bainskloof Pass, and then after that it gets a little bit complicated. Zooming out, Renosterhoek, 5 o'clock, still pushing 10 knots. And then to the east we can see this wind is all along the Langeberg, right onto the Langeberg. This has actually changed to a bit of a southeast from a southwest. We have this corner between Ashton and Swellendam where the wind actually picks up to nearly 18 or 20 knots, but it's straight onto the ridge. At Robertson there's a bit of a convergence, and there's the one side of the ridge is southeast and the other side is westerly, which could be interesting. You can see that on the the high resolution map over here. It's showing actually just east of Robertson, between Robertson and Ashton, this area where the wind changes completely. Let's look at some cloud. Cloud has been the most difficult thing to forecast over the last few days. It always seems that we get the moisture level reported by the model is wrong, and it's changed. This forecast has changed in the last 24 hours already, so it might change again by tomorrow morning. But we can see this is at 2 o'clock and it's blue all the way past Swellendam, and then getting towards Riversdale there's cloud, but it's high, it's over 5,000-6,000 feet, so that's not a problem. And at 5 o'clock you can see the low cloud is moving in, and this is perhaps down at 3,000 feet at Riversdale, pushing in close to Swellendam. So going east will depend on the amount of moisture and what happens over there. Let's look at some soundings. I'll start with going east. This is Robertson. You can see it looks very good at 2 o'clock, but this wind is westerly and about 10 knots. But it'll all be thermic. At 5 o'clock, more southwesterly and the wind has dropped. That's part of that convergence zone that I mentioned. Swellendam still southwesterly with a fairly significant westerly component, below 10 knots, but thermic up to 5,500 feet. It drops at 5 o'clock to thermic at 4,000 feet, and the wind's coming from the southeast. So that's coastal air cutting off Swellendam. And we can see a similar picture for Riversdale at 2 o'clock and at 5 o'clock, and Herbertsdale 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock is totally cut off. So if it's not the cloud that's cutting us off in the east, it will be the low inversion level. So there's still a chance of going there, or maybe we go east and then north, but there are lots of options for tomorrow. Going north, we're looking at Tilbach now. That wind is straight onto the Witzenberg at about 10 knots. Inversion level at 4.5, maybe 5,000 feet. That will light up the Witzenberg very nicely. At 5 o'clock it's still working. The wind is a little bit southwest, dropped a little bit. The inversion has gone up to nearly 6,000 feet. A little bit of this high cloud appearing over here, but it's not enough to affect us, I don't believe. There's no indication of actual cloud formation, it's just moisture. Porterville, 4,500 feet. Wind southwesterly, pretty much onto the ridge, quite light, 5 to 10 knots. Bit stronger at 5 o'clock, still southwesterly, and the inversion's picked up. Renosterhoek, quite westerly for Renosterhoek because the ridge curves around. Winds are quite light, under 10 knots, but in thermic at over 4,500 feet. Down to about 4,000 feet at 5 o'clock, with the wind coming round more southwest. All of that should work tomorrow. Clanwilliam, the winds are quite light, but the direction is quite good. Up to about 4,500 feet. It's a possibility. Still working at 5 o'clock, but coming more southerly and the wind's dropping. Clava looks reasonable at 2 o'clock. That wind is quite light, but it's straight westerly, which is onto the very low ridge at Clava. But at 5 o'clock, the inversion is too low in order to climb back up again onto the higher ridges to get home again. So if Clava is a turn point, it will have to be rounded earlier in the day. So lots of options for flying tomorrow, and an easier forecast to prepare. I'll update this in the morning and also put comments on the YouTube channel. Fly safely and have fun.